What a productive time of the day, everyone! This video will help you out in session plan preparation. In a simple manner, session plan is a clearly written trainer's aid for conducting a competency-based training. So there are 9 elements in a session plan, namely the sector or industry sector, qualification title, unit of competency, module title, learning outcomes, introduction, learning activities, trainee's evaluation or also known as assessment plan, and the last is the teacher's self-reflection of the session. So before you start working on session plan, you must secure a copy of training regulations or TR or a competency-based curriculum. So both are downloadable in TESDA website. So it is more advisable to use the TR as your guide than the CBC because this TR is the principal source in the preparation of CBC or competency-based curriculum. So this is an example of competency-based curriculum. The content in here are obtained from the training regulations. And training regulation is also the basis for the formulation of competency assessment and the main guide in the preparation of instructional materials. More so, there are some downloadable competency-based curriculum that are not updated so as to compare with the amendments that took place in the training regulations. So better to use the TR in session plan making. So as a start, here is the standard template for session plan. Following the result of the training needs analysis you watched in the previous video, for this one, we will prepare a session plan for Cookery NC2. So based on the result of the self-assessment check, our trainee doesn't have yet a competency in presenting a range of appetizer and in storing appetizer. It is because she marked the column no. So therefore, it is declared as his training gap in the summary of the current competencies that she had. So therefore, we need to make a session plan on how the training will be conducted to cater her needs and to meet this training gap. So as you can see in the training needs analysis form number 1.4, these are the training needs. And present a range of appetizer and store appetizer is under the unit of competency, prepare appetizer. So that is how the principle of competency-based training works. The training is individualized and it focuses on the competencies that are not yet acquired by the trainee in any learning situations. So in accomplishing the heading part of the session plan, you must be guided by the TR. So the sector of qualification is presented in its cover page. So as you can see, Cookery NC2 is our qualification title. And it is under the sector of tourism. So you should have to write it down there, tourism sector and qualification title, cookery. And as we may recall, our unit of competency is core competency is prepare appetizers. So you should also have to write in and specify it there. So that is the unit of competency. It is the prepare appetizer since it is the unit that we identified as the training gap earlier. So in terms of module title, it is actually the unit of competency. So it is actually the unit of competency. That's it. However, it is expressed in, or the verb is expressed in present participle form. So instead of prepare appetizers, we should have to change the word prepare with the present participle form of the verb, and that will become preparing appetizers. It's so easy, right? So we're done on the heading part. Now let's proceed to the learning outcomes. The learning outcomes, or LO, are the learning blocks of the module. So they are termed as elements in the TR. So browsing the competencies or browsing the cookery NC2 unit of competency, prepare appetizer. Let's try to check it out. Okay, unit of competency, prepare appetizers. You will see there are 4 elements. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's why in our learning outcome for the session plan, we will have these 4 elements. So just have to copy the first element and it will become your first learning outcome, perform mise en place. The second element is prepare a range of appetizers and it will become your second learning outcomes. The third one is present range of appetizers and it will become your third learning outcomes. And then the last is store appetizers. So that will become your last learning outcomes. So you're done. And how about in introduction part? So for an introduction part, actually it intends to motivate the learner or the student to learn. Thus, it provides an overall view of what the training aims to accomplish. So you can refer to the unit descriptor in the TR for the content of the introduction part. So where is the unit descriptor? It is right after the unit code. So you can have, or you may just have to copy that one and then paste it here. Alright, so the introduction may now tend to become, this unit deals with the skills and knowledge required in preparing and presenting hot appetizer. And then I will just have to add some little more lines to make it more enticing. So therefore, I prefer to add lines like different methodologies are suggested in this plan to cater to the varied need or varied learning styles and needs of the trainees. There you have it, the introduction. And now let us proceed to the learning activities. So the learning activity part comprises the column for the learning content, methods, presentation, practice, feedback, resources, and time. So before accomplishing this column, you should have to indicate first the learning outcomes you will be working. So in here, our focus is learning outcome number 3. Why? Because that is the learning outcome that is lacking or considered as a gap and need to be trained, need for the training of our learner. So you should have just to copy the learning outcomes number 3. Then write it down on the space. All right. To decide on what learning content you must include on the training to guarantee the acquisition of competency in presenting a range of appetizers, you must refer in the performance criteria of the TR, the range of variables on the next page, and the evidence guide. So meaning to say you have to read the training regulations very well. So upon reading the training regulations, you can determine the knowledge, the skills, and the attitude the training must cover. So for an instance, focusing on the learning outcomes, present range of appetizers, I determined that the trainee must have knowledge on the different factors in plating the dishes. So as you can see, it is highlighted, or it is written in bold type of letter. So if you may observe those things in the performance criteria, it means that part is very critical and it is highly important. So aside from that, I also noticed that there is a need for the learner to have skills in presenting appetizers attractively. So that's why I make it a point that the learning content must have factors to consider in plating dishes, specifically appetizers, and the second learning content will be the different styles of presenting appetizers attractively. So maybe you notice that there is the numbering on the learning content. So the first one will be 3.1. So that number format simply represents the LO sequence. So that's why I write here 3, because present a range of appetizer is the third, and 1 here represents the sequence of the topic. Okay, so we're done with the learning content. Let's proceed to the methods. So considering the learner's characteristics, a varied learning styles, methods or training delivery must be done in variety of approaches. So to cater the needs of a visual learner, modular or individualized learning is a good choice. So for auditory learner, lecture with PowerPoint presentation will be of help. While for kinesthetic learners, demonstration is a must to let them fully engage in the learning process. So as a means for presenting those methods, the visual learner must be reading the information sheet. So actually information sheet and the ways on how are you going to prepare it will be discussed on the next video. So for the meantime, let me just specify here, reading the information sheet 3.3-1. So why the number change? So numbering format change because it's the format for the presentation of information sheet code. So as I mentioned, it will be discussed on a separate video covering the CBLM writing procedure. So just to give you a hint, the first number here, which is 3, represents or tells the core competency number. So if you can still remember, preparing appetizer is third on the core competencies. And then the next number, which is 3, represents the learning outcomes covered in the session plan. And 1 is simply the content number. That's it. So for a clearer, detailed presentation, you should just have to write the title of the information sheet, and that title would be somehow the learning content, which is factors to consider in plating dishes such as appetizers. So then let's proceed for the presentation of lecture with PowerPoint presentation. So this is for the auditory learner. And then the auditory learner must be viewing the PowerPoint presentation. Typographical error. The PowerPoint presentation and or while listening on the lecture about 10 factors to consider in plating dishes such as appetizers. All right. So for the kinesthetic learners and how the means to present the demonstration, the kinesthetic learners then will be given a time for demonstrating proper way of plating appetizers while considering the factors. So the factors such as appeal, color, and contrast, temperature of the food, and services and equipment. Maybe you are wondering where did I get those terms, those factors. So going back to the content of the performance criteria, it is highlighted there, factors in plating dishes. You may be able to view those details under the range of variables, factors in plating the dishes, and there you have these factors: the appeal, the color and contrast, temperature of the food service, equipment. So I decided not to include classical innovative arrangement styles because I had a plan of presenting it on the next topic or content, which is the different styles of presenting appetizers. And now we're done on the presentation. Then the column for practice indicates the means on how the learner will be able to apply and assess the knowledge, skills, and attitude she acquired. Thus in here, the learner will be answering self-check 3.3-1. After reading the information sheet 3.3-1. So the number code must be the same. Even if the method used is a lecture with PowerPoint presentation, you can also request the learner to answer a self-check as a means of validating or assessing what she learned from the lecture with PowerPoint presentation. But if it is demonstration, the learner will be engaged in performing task sheet 3.3-1. Error. So maybe somehow you can also request her to accomplish a job sheet. So actually there is a separate video for the discussion of these types of instructional sheets, namely the self-check, the task sheet, the job sheet, and the performance criteria and the like. So moving on to the next column, which is the feedback. So in CBT principle, it is a must that every trainee or learner must be given immediate feedback on the result of the practice or application. If she's receiving modular instruction, it is included in the CBLM, the different answer sheet, so she can immediately assess her own learning and get a feedback on her own performance. So she can do that by comparing her answers to the answer key. So answer key 3.3-1. Same is true if she was given a lecture, answer self-check. So you should have to give her also means for feedback by comparing answer to the answer key 3.3-1. So meanwhile, if it is for demonstration, a task sheet is given and it is supplemented with the performance criteria checklist. So then the learner will be evaluating her performance using the performance criteria checklist 3.3-1. There you have it. Now for the resources or the resources column, you just need to indicate the learning materials that will help you to facilitate the training. So for modular instruction, CBLM containing information sheet and self-check as well as answer sheet is badly needed. So for lecture with PowerPoint presentation, we need PowerPoint slides. So you may just have to indicate there the title of the PowerPoint presentation, and that will be coming from the title of or the learning content. For the demonstration approach, we also need CBLM that contains the task sheet, performance criteria checklist, and the actual tools and equipment, as well as the ingredients will be part of the what we call learning resources. Ingredients. Okay. Ingredients. Okay. So last column, time is actually optional because CBT learning is a self-paced. So however, identifying expected duration of the training will help you as a trainer to determine whether you or your trainee is a fast learner or not. So the sum total of this training period must meet the nominal duration specified in the TR. So let's browse that part. So under the TR, you can find it on the section 3, training agreements. So you can find the nominal duration for the total core competencies. The nominal duration is 280 hours. So as an assumption, a modular learning could effectively facilitated in 1 hour. Lecture with PowerPoint presentation is for 2 hours. While demonstration is good for 3 hours. Okay, so we're done with the first learning content. So same analysis and procedure is expected in the or on the succeeding lesson. So you can make variation of training methodologies depending on the topic and the skills you want the learners to acquire. So as you can see here on the second learning content, I still have modular individualized training. So same procedure follows. There will be reading of information, answering self-check, comparing answers, and the resources will be the CBLM. However, instead of lecture with PowerPoint presentation, as the method I used in learning content number 1, here in learning content number 2, I'll be using group discussion method for auditory learner. So as a mean of presentation, she will be or the learner will be listening and participating to the group discussion on the different styles of presenting the research attractively. And then the trainee will be answering the self-check questions in the handouts and then evaluate the answers from the answers in the handout. So the learning resource will be handout on the different styles of presenting appetizers attractively. So by the way, as you notice, the numbering or the number code change because in here we are dealing now with learning content number 2. Okay, so demonstration is still used to facilitate the learning for the kinesthetic learner. So in the succeeding learning outcomes, such as in learning outcome number 5, store appetizers, which is identified as another learning outcome, that is the gap of the gap of the training. From the previous video, I makes use of a different methodology, and that is video showing instead of group discussion. So this is in video showing, this will allow the learners to watch the video on tips in storing appetizers. Then instead of using demonstration, I opt to choose case study, wherein learners will be participating in the group discussion on what tips in storing appetizer is applicable to the given situation. Okay, and then the thing will follow because after participating in the case study, there will be questions in the activity sheet that must be answered, and then part of the feedbacking is critiquing answers from the answer sheet, and then there would be a required learning resource which is activity sheets on the report on the tips in storing appetizers. So that's how you prepare a set of session plan for a specific LO. By the way, identification of the most appropriate training delivery method will reflect the creativity of the teacher or trainer in facilitating a competency-based training. So second to the last element is the assessment plan that indicates the method of evaluating the achievement of learning outcome. So you may refer in the TR on the part of evidence plan. So let us go back to the part of the evidence plan for ideas on what assessment method is applicable for this unit of competency, and you may find it here in the evidence guide. So it is on the part of methods for assessment. So if you will read this one, you will get an idea on the different assessment plan you can have as part of the training. So therefore in here I decided to have written tests wherein the learner is required to submit completed answer sheet and its result, and also a performance test that by means of direct observation of how the candidate or whether the learner how the learner will be preparing the appetizers. So you can also include on the process of collecting the result, the students will be needing to document every action she will be performing, and she can do some writings on the trainee's record book, and all of these things will be part of the assessment process. So lastly, teacher's self-reflection of the session. And actually, this part must be accomplished when the training is already completed, because this portion indicates the observation of the teacher on the sufficiency of the learning content and the learning resources. It also means to see the appropriateness of the methodology used and some other factors that affect the training. This is highly essential for further review and improvement of the session plan. So that's the end of our session plan procedure. Hope that this video provides a significant assistance on your preparation of a session plan. Oops! Thank you for watching.